Thank you to our sponsors, GT Medical Technologies, IQVIA Biotech, Karyopharm Therapeutics, Kintara Therapeutics, Mayo Clinic, American Association of Neurological Surgeons Tumor Section, Bracewell PRG, Cortana Pharmaceuticals, De Novo Biopharma, Erasca, Foundation Medicine, Global Coalition for Adaptive Research, Immunomic Therapeutics, Integra Foundation, Katmai Pharmaceuticals, Kasia Therapeutics, Kiatech, MD Anderson Cancer Center, Medexus Pharma, Novacure, Plus Therapeutics, Society for Neuro-Oncology, Stanford Healthcare, Stern Kessler, The Colony Group, UCLA Health, UCSF Brain Tumor Center, UPMC Hillman Cancer Center, VBI Vaccines. Thank you for your support.
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today for the 4th annual Glioblastoma Awareness Day virtual panel. My name is David Arons, and I'm the President and CEO of the National Brain Tumor Society. I'll be serving as moderator for today's discussion. About 13,000 times a year, a doctor will walk into an exam room and tell a patient that they've been diagnosed with glioblastoma. For patients and their loved ones, it's a time of great uncertainty as they try to navigate next steps and grapple with their prognosis. Glioblastoma, or GBM, is one of the toughest cancers on the planet. It takes so much from those who are affected, patients, caregivers, families, and loved ones. It's a cancer that afflicts the body, but often afflicts the mind, stealing one's sense of self. In the face of a glioblastoma diagnosis, families rely on love, hope, and the promise that research is advancing toward a cure. Glioblastoma, or GBM Awareness Day, began as a bipartisan effort in the U.S. Congress in partnership with the National Brain Tumor Society to help Americans honor loved ones who have faced this disease and take action to defeat it. I'm pleased to be joined here today by our expert panel, who will talk about how they are each working to give patients and their loved ones hope for a cure, a sense of community, and a better quality of life this year and in the decade ahead. I want to give a warm welcome to our panelists, Arun and Geetha Anantharaman. Arun is a glioblastoma survivor, and Geetha is his caregiver and their National Brain Tumor Society advocates. Dr. Edjah Endum, Associate Professor of Neurosurgery at Emory University School of Medicine. Dr. Mark Gilbert, Chief and Senior Investigator of the Neuro-Oncology Branch and Deputy Director of the Center for Cancer Research at the National Cancer Institute. Christine Roth, Head of Oncology Strategic Business Unit and member of the Bayer Pharmaceuticals Executive Committee. Danielle Carnival, White House Cancer Moonshot Coordinator. Thank you all for joining us here today. I'd like to start our program by introducing Arun and Geetha. Arun is a glioblastoma survivor, patient. Geetha, Arun's partner and caregiver. Thank you so much for joining us here today. As we get started, we want to ground ourselves in the patient experience, glioblastoma. Can you tell us a little bit about what it was like to get a glioblastoma diagnosis and how that impacted you and your family?
Yeah. First of all, pleasure all over to meet you on this forum, David. Thank you.
Yeah, same here. And I can go first if you want. Okay, so the thing about glioblastoma for me was first time it was surreal, right? The fact that we were going through something that we weren't prepared for. And so, the first time I got, I was getting ready to have my craniotomy. The conversations we were having with my son, it was his question was really about as I was just explaining to what was going to go through it, his question was, does this mean that this is going to change your sense of humor? So that cracked me up in terms of what we think about and what our kids were thinking about as well.
Yeah, to add to that, Arun's diagnosis was, a tsunami that hit our family from nowhere in zero time. We had to educate ourselves on the disease, the prognosis, and the treatment options, so that we could move forward right away. And at the time, both our kids, one was 17 and the other one was 13, this anxiety-prone boy, and we had to inform and educate them so that they do not freak out. In zero time, we had to rally support from friends and family, and then educate them as to to what to expect. While I would focus on Arun's well-being and care, and a little bit longer was also the impact on for the family in terms of the changing dynamics, Arun's job and the financial impact it would have, and me having to take on some of the roles that Arun would play at home, as an example. So the impact was pretty significant, immediate, as well as ongoing.
Wow, it seems like that word tsunami, you had to learn a tsunami's worth of information about medical care, about the disease, having to prepare your family. As you, knowing what you know now, as you think about that time point, what advice would you give to healthcare providers around, what you would like to be different to help with that tsunami effect? And maybe you can't change that effect that much, but what advice would you give to providers looking back at that time point?
Yeah, sure. David, yes, the tsunami effect probably is not changeable because this is such a lethal disease when we first learn about it. Having said that, one of the things one of the challenges that we see is the limited treatment options. We see the research moving forward in terms of the immunotherapy and additional options. However, as you see, the gold standard of standard treatment has been at the same stage for many years. So my urge to healthcare providers is that it would be good to have different options versus this is one size fit all option. And the second thing would be some of the other research and the technologies that have been on the table, accelerate their wider adoption. One is awareness, education, and wider access to it. Thankfully, we have resources such as NBTS, which is a gold mine of educational resources that we can go and help to stay on top of where the research is. But to medical providers, my request is to put more fuel into it so that we can find a cure or at least multiple treatment options in the interim. We had to have the same protocol with the initial diagnosis and with the recurrence a few years later. So this time I hope that in future there will be multiple options for treatment as a stepping stone for permanent cure.
Just one last thing also, this is the point that I wanted to say was, don't give up. This is my 6th year going through glioblastoma, and so just keep doing what you're doing, and which is most important.
That's a great take-home message. One of the things that's special about you both is while you're trying to care for each other, you also care about the larger brain tumor community, the larger glioblastoma community, and you've become advocates for the community. What does it mean to you to be an advocate and to advocate for change for the brain tumor community?
Yeah, this, like we are standing on the shoulders of so many, whether it's our medical care team, whether it's a resource such as NBTS. So we feel very strongly that we need to do our part. To increase the awareness, not in our friends and family circle, but in the greater community. And we need to do our part in joining forces, in fight against this. When organizations such as NBTS is fighting, I think it's our duty to do what we can to support them so that together we find a cure.
Totally agree. I love that word. It is our duty to work together to go find a cure. And really grateful that you both are here with us. And we're all joining forces on this glioblastoma awareness day to go put those strategies to work. And you're a big part of advancing the strategy, advancing towards cures. And so be well, be with us, and we're with you every day. Thanks so much for joining us today on this panel.
Thank you.
Thank you. And ditto, it's like, what would we do without a resource such as yours? So, thank you for fighting the war on our behalf.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Terrific. Now I'd like to move on to Dr. Edjah Endum from Emory. Dr. Endum, thanks so much for joining us today. You work with patients and caregivers like Arun and Geetha on a daily basis. And you also volunteer your time to improve policies and systems that you work within and you work in those communities. To advance our quest to cure glioblastoma, there are things we can control and things we can influence, but we can't control. For example, we can't exactly control when a major scientific discovery is going to be made, but we can have more influence around the surrounding research and healthcare environment to create a better likelihood for success. Some of these things depend on policy, some depend on money, some depend on processes, some depend on people. We know what we can do to try to engineer progress, and we have to do it. But in the case of glioblastoma, a disease that's thwarted us, what's your view? What can we try to do to engineer progress? Let's start first with research and then move to the all-important healthcare, knowing that research and healthcare are really intertwined.
Yeah, thanks for that question, David, and thanks for inviting me to this talk and allowing me to be a part of this glioblastoma day that you and others have spent so much time tirelessly advocating for it and promoting. When we think about research for glioblastoma, we've obviously learned a lot about the tumor over the past several years and learned things about patients that are harboring this disease that have been helpful, things that have helped us classify what used to be essentially what we called one thing, glioblastoma broadly, into many different categories, right? There are some patients that were diagnosed with what we would have called a glioblastoma 10, 20 years ago that a lot of people wouldn't even call a glioblastoma today based on their markers. And that's useful and it's important for how we classify patients for trials and move forward. But when we look at the results that we've gotten treatment-wise, obviously we've got a long way to go. And for me, that means that we have to chart a new course. We need to do things differently than what we did in the past. If we do the same, big trials with drugs repurposed from other cancers that aren't specifically designed for glioblastoma without spending a lot of time qualifying how those agents could specifically work in the brain and work better for patients that are dealing with brain tumors, I don't know that we're going to see the sorts of progress that we want to make. So talking about solutions, I think part of it is optimizing shots on goal. It was a wonderful term that we bandied about quite a bit when we're talking about the innovative venture fund that the National Brain Tumor Society put together to help bring new dollars into the fight to end brain tumors and brain cancer once and for all. And the idea of that is, my son actually plays soccer and he's a striker. So this is actually a very natural thought for me. But if he's not going to score if he doesn't shoot, right? So you have to continue to put the ball towards the goal and have them targeted right at the goal. Otherwise, there's no chance that you're going to score. And same thing with our research. Now, I think we need a lot more nimble, smaller trials with agents that have been designed specifically for the treatment of brain tumors like glioblastoma, so that we can see the results from those small trials and then use that to continue to make progress. And along those same lines, in those small trials, we need to build in innovative biomarkers, ways that we can measure how these drugs or these different treatment approaches are working in the brain or not, so that every time we take a shot, we learn something from it, right? So every time we try a drug with a patient, who's signed up for a clinical trial and has said, I'm going to trust your judgment that this is something that might help me, whether or not we see a direct response for that patient, we should be able to tell that patient, their family, and the community what we've learned by doing that trial. Did that drug make it into the brain? If it got into the brain, did that drug have the effect we thought it would have once in the brain? If it made it into the brain and had the effect that we expected it would have in the brain, did the result of that effect actually help treat the patient's cancer? These are all critical questions that are not routinely answered when we do clinical trials today. And I think that's something that needs to change. With efforts from the National Brain Tumor Society and others, there are some efforts at NIH to change how some of these trials are done, and there is more of a focus on these sorts of early phase and window of opportunity trials, but we can be doing much more. Another thing I've been talking about, I think a lot more recently, and I think a lot of people are talking about, is that when you look at actually the business literature a little bit more, there's a lot of data around diversity and how diversity makes teams work really, really well. And that has been accepted in the business community for a long time. And in the scientific community, we're just starting to understand that a little bit more. And the general idea is if you're bringing all of the best minds to bear on a given problem, you're more likely to see results. And there is some data that shows that, for example, if you have a paper that has people of many different backgrounds on that paper is much more likely to be more impactful and be published in a higher impact journal. And so that is to say that we need to bring all of the brilliant people of this country in the United States specifically, as well as throughout the world, and bring them all to the table to talk about research and talk about brain tumor research generally. In the same way, and we'll talk a little bit more when we get to treatment with this, we need to make sure that all of the people in the country and all different types of people are being involved on clinical trials and have access to clinical trials and new therapies. Because if we're not learning how these potential treatments work in everybody, we will miss opportunities for seeing better results. And we may also miss some challenges that we'll run into down the line if we don't have those experiences in the upfront trials.
You make such an important point about the power of diversity and its potential role in bringing the best minds forward, but bringing forward opportunities for everybody to participate in clinical research and innovation in glioblastoma research. What comes to mind is a couple structural things that we could all be doing differently, better of, more of, whether it's government, industry, hospitals, patient advocacy groups, to try to better involve people of different backgrounds, different expertise, different geographies, different socioeconomic statuses, to try to better leverage that diversity?
There's a lot of things that we can do. Again, there are some existing initiatives, things that help bring community health centers together with the big academic centers so that they can work collaboratively towards clinical trial development, enrolling patients on trials, reaching out from what some would consider ivory towers like Emory University School of Medicine and Winship Cancer Institute to our partner organizations that are in more rural areas, for example, to make sure that those patients have more access to trials. But there are several things that we still need to focus on. One of those I alluded to earlier, which I do think that workforce diversity has a large part of it. I think that when you have people who are members of all communities, participating in development and implementation of these clinical trials, they're much more likely to reach back out to the communities that they came from, whether that's an urban underserved population or a rural population or an immigrant population. If you have those people from all those populations represented on the clinical trial team, they're much more likely to have relationships in those communities and be able to go back out and make sure that their people, that their community is involved in the research as participants as well. And another thing that's a lot of people don't think a lot about is that most of our very innovative, kind of very forward-thinking clinical trials and therapies are going to be coming out of NCI designated cancer centers. And the NCI has had a big effort for a long time identifying cancer centers that are strategically placed throughout the country. And these centers have very specific resources from the federal government to help improve the cancer care in their communities and to do very innovative research. The problem is that the way that our healthcare system is currently fragmented, not every individual is guaranteed that their health insurance, which could even be government funded, is going to include an NCI designated cancer center as in network. So you could literally have someone who's in Georgia and a certain part of Georgia who's going to work and having insurance, or maybe they're down on their luck and they're relying in part on the state or the federal government for their health care insurance, and they get struck with cancer, and then find out that they're really limited to the providers that they can get care from. And don't get me wrong, we have some phenomenal community partners that we partner with and provide phenomenal cancer care in a lot of areas. But when you deal with rare tumors like glioblastoma and particularly certain subsets and inoperable cases or deep midline cases where those cases are quite rare. And so at a place like Winship Cancer Institute, I may see several of them and have an idea of how I might treat that patient differently from someone who has maybe more standard disease and maybe even know of clinical trials that we're either running here or elsewhere that we could offer to the patient that might have better treatments for them, because patients often do better on these clinical trials, and they just might not have access to them in the community. So that's just another kind of structural thing that I think keeps people in some cases who are in community centers from being able to get some of the best care that we might have centrally. And if I may say, that sort of access barrier, again, getting people from rural communities, urban underserved communities, into clinical trials, into the best cancer centers. Those are the sorts of things that are being talked about a lot as we talk about the relaunch of the Cancer Moonshot, because one of the low-hanging pieces of fruit there for improving cancer care globally is making sure that our best care gets delivered to everybody. If everybody's not getting the best care, and we have huge disparities in outcomes, whether that's by race or socioeconomic status or rural-urban status, those gaps help drive the high cancer death rate that we have today. So if we want to tackle that for everybody, that means we have to tackle it for everybody. And that means bringing everybody to the places where we have the best care.
So from redesigning and improving clinical trials to make them smaller, more nimble, learn quickly, fail fast if we need to leveraging the full power of diversity, to tearing down those barriers to the best hospitals and making sure patients get access to top specialists like you. These are three things we can do to make the rest of this decade better for glioblastoma patients and advance towards our quest for a cure. Edjah, thanks so much for being with us today. Thanks so much for pointing the way to the future. And I know we're all going to be working together to help find a cure to glioblastoma.
Absolutely. Thanks again for the invitation, and I'm looking forward to the progress we make.
Likewise. Thanks so much.
Take care.
Well, great. Let's move on now to Dr. Mark Gilbert from the National Cancer Institute. Thanks again for being here, Dr. Gilbert. When the Cancer Moonshot was originally created 5 years ago by then Vice President Biden, this funding helped the NCI create a program that you're now leading with others called the NCI Connect Program. And this has become a program of great importance to brain tumor patients and to research. Can you tell us a little bit more about what the program is, what the impact of this program has on efforts to advance research against glioblastoma and its strategy?
Great. Well, thanks again, David, so much for inviting me to this celebration of glioblastoma awareness. In the NCI Connect program, which I co-lead with Dr. Terry Armstrong, who's also a senior investigator at the NCI, it's a program designed to really help patients who have rare cancers of the central nervous system, so meaning both the brain and the spinal cord. And importantly, we recognize that this is an area of unmet need. If you actually look at the WHO guidebook of neuropathology, last edition just came out this past year, 2021, there are over 130 different types of brain and spinal cord tumors. And so it's obvious that it would be very difficult to study all of those diseases. But we also recognize that as we move forward in our investigation of the more common brain tumors, most notably glioblastoma, that our increasing technology has allowed us to separate some of those glioblastoma tumors into very distinct categories based on their genetic or molecular findings. And it's the hope that as we sort of parse those diseases out and we understand their underlying biology and what really drives the cancer, that we would be able to find very specific and very effective therapies. And we're very fortunate that in the last few weeks, actually, an example of this has come to the fore. We have recognized for many years that some, not a very large percentage, but some malignant glioma, glioblastoma, have a particular mutation in a gene called BRAF. It's called the BRAF V600E mutation. And when you take two drugs, one that targets this specific mutation, and you also target its common path of resistance called MEK pathway, MEK, that a fairly high percentage of patients will have a response. If a tumor does not have the BRAF mutation, it does not respond. So again, we've taken what we call glioblastoma as a large group and have identified, albeit a small percentage, but a percentage of patients who would respond to this specific therapy. Now, how does this reflect back on the NCI Connect? Well, we've chosen 12 types of malignant brain tumors, not glioblastoma. We're focusing on the more uncommon or the rare tumors in an effort to develop a platform, an algorithm to address the specific needs of the patients with these rare cancers and to try to find specific targets. And again, the rare cancers tend to be less different from one another than a disease like glioblastoma. So imagine a rare cancer would be as sort of similar as the subtype of the BRAF V600E glioblastoma. So if you think about these 12 types of cancers as being a model for moving this type of approach to glioblastoma, where we can start to identify these small subgroups and sort of start picking away at the global group, I think that it puts the efforts of the NCI Connect into that perspective. Of course, very importantly, we are addressing diseases that have been very difficult to address because of their rarity. So the NCI Connect, funded by the Moonshot program, allows us to see patients with these rare diseases, do a lot of testing, develop models in the laboratory, try to find new treatments specifically for either these tumors or for some of their molecular targets, which of course may be applicable to glioblastoma and other diseases. And importantly, a large component of this is evaluating patients' outcome. How do patients do with therapies? What's the natural history of these cancers? Because again, they're typically understudied, so we can get a better sense of that. And I don't want to forget that a large part of the NCI Connect is also outreach and education. So we've developed a website that has a lot of information for patients, for caregivers, family, and also for professionals who are helping with these patients. And this has gotten tremendous traction.
You've talked so much about the importance of breaking down glioblastoma into smaller groups, and you just said that it's really important to have patients involved in the research and evaluating their tissue, and also evaluating how they think, feel, and function. What's your message to the glioblastoma patient community about getting involved in clinical research and what they can bring to advancing clinical trials?
So I think it's absolutely critical that every patient who is eligible for a clinical trial and has access to a clinical trial participate. The data are very clear, even in clinical trials where the therapy is deemed not to be better than standard therapy. The patients themselves do better. There is more attention to detail by the treating teams, the physicians, and other healthcare providers. There's a standardization of care. So overall, it's a benefit to the patients, and it's a clear benefit to the field as we learn. Importantly, in many of these clinical trials, there's science that is also added into the clinical trial to better understand the biology of the cancer and to ask questions like, why did a treatment work? Or more importantly, why didn't it work when it looked so promising before the clinical trial started? And it's through these types of efforts, David, that people have uncovered new targets, and these new targets haven't allowed, these discoveries like the BRAF V600E that has now actually gone on to FDA approval. So the BRAF inhibitor, the MEK inhibitor combination was approved by the FDA, not just for one type of cancer, but for many types of cancer that have this molecular signature. And fortunately, glioma is among them because of the very good results from a series of clinical trials. So I think that's the goal. We have to go into our clinical trials with the recognition that we need to learn more, we need to know better, and we need to take advantage of the opportunity to study these cancers in detail. And again, look at a clinical trial and say, how much can we get out of this and not cut corners and to make sure we are as comprehensive as possible.
Well, Dr. Gilbert, thanks again so much. It sounds like some key messages there of, while we're working for speed, we also can't cut those corners. We have to do research the right way, learn from every patient. Is it fair to say that the Neuro-Oncology branch is open and eager to hear from patients?
Absolutely. We're happy to see any adult patient with a brain tumor in the United States.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate you being here with us for Glioblastoma Awareness Day and its 4th annual event. Thank you again. With that, let's talk with Christine Ross from Bayer Oncology. Christine, thanks again for being with us today. As you know, but for our audience, Bayer Oncology for the last several years has been an active company and a leader in the field of brain tumor research, particularly in glioblastoma. And it's also searching for solutions to improve survival and quality of life for glioblastoma patients in clinical trials. Bayer has really been a leader in one of the most innovative clinical trials called GBM Agile. It's a first of its kind trial, but Bayer is also developing other promising drugs that may have potential for brain tumor patients. Would you kindly share a little bit about what Bayer is doing and its strategy for helping brain tumor patients?
Well, thank you for having me, first of all. And as we were chatting before the discussion today, GBM is an area of oncology that is near and dear to my heart. Nearly 2 years ago, I lost my mom to GBM after a 45-year survivorship from breast cancer. So I know far too well the shock of the diagnosis, the struggle to gain access to effective treatments that many patients and their families go through. At Bayer Oncology, we take pride in the fact that we are not afraid to pursue the areas of highest unmet need in oncology, like GBM, despite the difficulty of drug development in the area and the challenges that many others have walked away from. So whether it's our own sponsorship of investigational clinical trials for our medicines or supporting academic investigators who have an interest, we are more than happy to be good partners in the GBM research area. So, our interest has recently been reinvigorated, if you will, pardon the pun here, with a study that emerged from an Italian academic institution called the RIGOMA study, which was using one of our agents, regorafenib, in GBM patients, where we saw very promising PFS benefit, enough so to where we are now in the midst of a phase 3 study with regorafenib, hoping for the results of that study to come out very soon. And if they support registration with the FDA and other regulatory bodies, we will rush to do that. And, you mentioned the GBM Agile Trial Program. We are very pleased to be the first company to sign up for this. And I think it's not just a trial program per se, but it's also an innovative platform that we were happy to support, that hopefully will simplify and speed up research in this area so that more potential treatments can generate data faster in hopes of getting to patients faster as well. So it's just one of many commitments that we've made in the GBM space.
Thanks so much for sharing that. And again, condolences on your loss. You're clearly personally part of our community very much. And share with us a little bit about, as you know firsthand, patients want survival, but they also want treatments that improve their quality of life. What do you see that could be done by Bayer or by industry or by others to produce products that both extend survival and that quality of life piece?
Sure. When you look at today's treatment options, there really is a small toolkit for clinicians to deploy. Mm-hmm. And whether it's chemotherapy that has minimal effectiveness but still comes with the side effects of chemotherapy, or forms of radiation which also are not terribly effective but leave the patient with systemic side effects, brain fog, other issues, there is such a need for new approaches. And so the approach that I mentioned before in the RIGOMA study uses a targeted agent. So if you can demonstrate a patient has a given mutation or another drug target, if you will, ideally candidates will have a disproportionately positive response. So more patients will respond based on that biomarker and potentially have a longer duration of benefit. So there's the targeted therapy approach. Many have tried immuno-oncology approaches with some degree of benefit. There may be new approaches that we can take with radiotherapy, either with antibodies attached to radiotherapy or radiotherapy on its own. So at Bayer, we have multiple modalities at our disposal to explore GBM with, and we are very active in the targeted therapy area now. But our pipeline is very active in looking for new modalities to deploy to GBM.
You mentioned precision medicines, and it makes us think about how can we bring forward new classes of drugs to bear on this cancer, glioblastoma. We've been working with researchers to bring forward and evaluate the group called DNA damage response drugs. Eager to get your thoughts about what this class of drugs might hold for glioblastoma patients.
Yeah, so it is another promising area of research in GBM, and I've had experience in this category in other tumor types, so I know it quite well. Data are emerging. Hopefully the early promise will continue to deliver promising phase 2, phase 3 data. In addition to the DNA damage response agents, Bayer also has in our very early pipeline a new class of drugs called novel molecular complex inducers. And this is somewhat similar to the DNA damage repair, but yet another modality that we may be able to deploy in the fight against GBM.
That's really great to hear. And it really gets into how do we find medicines that target particular subgroups of glioblastoma patients. Bayer, again, being a leader, developed a drug for a very small group, but it was approved for those glioma patients with what's called an NTRK fusion. Could you say a little bit more about what that drug is and what glioblastoma patients should know about it?
Yeah, so this is a drug, the generic name is larotrectinib, or Vitracvi is the brand name. And Vitracvi is incredibly effective in patients who have what's known as an NTRK fusion. And so this is a genetic aberration that is a very small patient population, which could have made drug development quite challenging. But the approach that Bayer took in collaboration with the FDA was to do a pan-tumor study. So normally when you study new targeted agents, you look at a specific type of cancer. Because these tumors are rare, these fusions are rare, we actually took a pan-tumor approach. And we also took the approach of investigating patients from pediatric patients to elderly patients. So we were very pleased when we received the first pan-tumor indication for NTRK fusion for both pediatric and adult patients recently. And so again, it's very important that patients make sure that their tumors are screened for this NTRK fusion, so that if they do find they have the fusion, that larotrectinib therapy can be quite effective.
That's so helpful for all of us to know more about that as a potential option if we have that type of rare fusion. Mm-hmm. So let's go back to big picture. Is here on the 4th annual Glioblastoma Awareness Day, what is your view on what we can accomplish over the next few years to really move the needle big time in glioblastoma research for patients?
Sure. I think first it takes commitment. And I hope through the examples that we've discussed today, you can see that Bayer is quite committed to this space. We need to make sure that we're bringing in the best and the brightest researchers with the best and the brightest scientists to support advancing novel ideas from bench to clinic to approval. We also need to better understand the patient journey with GBM and the caregiver journey with GBM, and looking for those insights that may help us even use the existing therapies that we have better. So managing side effects, finding ways to dose or schedule drugs so that they can provide the maximum benefit with the minimum side effects. So I think those are two areas which hold some promise moving forward. But I think the last one is really just to look at the novel areas of oncology where we've had success, like immuno-oncology. 20 years ago, we weren't even thinking about IO, and look how far we've come. There's another IO class coming. And when we see that first glimmer of that class's utility in GBM, it will be important for the entire GBM community to rally around that opportunity. I won't say go all in quite yet, because it takes some time to understand the potential benefit. But when we see something that has promise, it'll be really important for us all to work together to make sure we can advance that science as quickly as possible.
Christine, thanks so much for being with us today. Thanks for sharing your personal experience and commitment to the glioblastoma community and what you've been through, and to Bayer's leadership, innovation, and really having the patient's back of caring about putting patients first with the research that it's doing, so that we can all have someday be able to say that glioblastoma is in a rearview mirror. So thanks again for joining us on Glioblastoma Awareness Day.
It's my pleasure.
Now we'll talk with Dr. Danielle Carnival, who was integral in the Cancer Moonshot program at the White House and across government in 2016, and is now coordinating the White House reignition of the Cancer Moonshot under the Biden presidency. Danielle, thanks so much for being here with us today. Of course, the President and First Lady are the first ever glioblastoma patient caregivers in U.S. history, and in their role as leaders. And of course, they tragically know all too much about the pain and suffering that can come from glioblastoma from the passing of their son, Bo. But the President and the First Lady have really dedicated a significant effort into cancer and reigniting the Cancer Moonshot, involving multiple agencies of government, addressing health disparities, involving diversity and data collection, emphasizing doing more on rare cancers, including pediatric cancer, and structurally working to improve our nation's anti-cancer efforts by establishing a new agency to bring about innovation to cancer research. It's amazing. And so we're so grateful that you're here today to perhaps share with the brain tumor community, the glioblastoma community, what we should know about the reignition of the cancer moonshot.
Yeah, well, first, thank you for having me. It is really great to be here. As you pointed out, cancer touches nearly every American family. Glioblastoma in particular is very personal to the president and the first lady. It happens to also be personal to me. So to be here and kind of marking hopefully progress in addition to awareness is hugely important. So appreciate the opportunity. The reason the president reignited the Cancer Moonshot briefly is because we've come a long way, both in the science, in our understanding of public health and how to better deliver prevention and early detection and screening. And the president wanted to really bring all of government to bear on this issue. And so he set new goals to decrease the death rate from cancer by at least 50% over the next 25 years and to improve the experience of people living with and their caregivers and caregivers and loved ones through living with and surviving cancer. And so that is going to take a whole of government approach, but it's really going to take an all hands on deck approach. Organizations like yours stepping up, individuals sharing their ideas and stories. So I want to say there's a lot of details. We'll get into some of them, but to learn more, anyone can go to whitehouse.gov/cancermoonshot and learn more and contribute their own stories and their own ideas.
Thank you. I was going to ask you where we could go, and you just said it. That's great. And that goal of reducing mortality from cancer, that's such a bold and appropriate goal for our country. One of the things, of course, we worry about is making sure that even as we try to reach that goal, and if we do reach that goal, that we don't reach it, but then not make progress in some of the toughest cancers like glioblastoma. So what can the moonshot do to not only reach the macro goal, but also along the way, make sure that we're fighting some of the toughest, most biologically complex and treatment-resistant cancers like glioblastoma?
Yeah, I mean, listen, the advances that we've seen in oncology, in the science and the understanding that impact so many types of cancer really set us up to say, let's set a bold, quantifiable goal that we can hold ourselves to, work really hard now, and is achievable over the course of that time. But what you're pointing out is, okay, but we might be able to get to that goal if we focus on the 3 biggest cancers, and do we just leave everyone else out? And that's why not only did we set a quantifiable goal, but we set a really human goal of improving the experience of people. And that means improved outcomes. And so we took those big pieces, and the president always says he wants to end cancer as we know it. And so we defined what we meant by how do we know cancer today, so that we could really chart a path to say, let's end this part that isn't working well, let's end this part. And that takes us through early detection, prevention, addressing inequities, better targeting treatments to the right patients, addressing cancers where we don't currently have an answer right now, including glioblastoma, some of our deadliest cancers, rare cancers, childhood cancers. And while we don't today have a path and a specific formula to knock all of those down, I think what we're really committed to is saying we need new approaches, and we want to be leading with outside organizations and companies to bring those approaches together and really start to make a difference. Just so that I don't leave out the rest of the list, though, the other ways we know cancer that we can improve is also by learning from more patients, something that I know the National Brain Tumor Society does across the country, and better supporting patients and caregivers. So while that kind of quantifiable goal is something we really are going to hold ourselves to, we know that the experience is more than just that. And so we really outlined the shared agenda that we're going to be marching towards through the Cancer Cabinet, which is how we organized across the Biden-Harris administration. But we really hope everyone in the oncology community and beyond uses that as a shared agenda, and front and center as one of those is taking on cancers like glioblastoma.
Thank you. That's so helpful. It really sounds like a comprehensive approach. And just thinking back to the 2016 experience and moving into today, one of the areas that President Biden almost uniquely challenged all of us on was technology, innovating technology, including better data collection and sharing that data. And now we see this exciting new agency being formed, designed to try to harness the power of technology and even accelerate the pace of research, the ways that may have been done in the defense area with this agency now called ARPA-H. What ideas or what opportunities does this new agency offer that we should know about and try to work with?
Yeah, to start on the first part of your question on the president's real focus on making sure that we're using and sharing data, I think what he identified early on as we started this work as part of the Moonshot is what we know too. As we understand these cancers at a genomic level, at a proteogenomic level, as we really understand how unique these cancers are and how they develop and how we might approach them, we all know that we're going to have to share data more broadly, that we're not going to see enough patients at one place with the same type of cancer to really understand how to target it. So just to stop on that point, that is still a goal. And that is still something that we're hoping to drive and lead from the federal government, but it's really going to take everyone stepping up as part of that. But on ARPA-H, the president's vision with ARPA-H is to bring new tools. And we have driven through taxpayer investment, through the National Institutes of Health, so much innovation over decades, right? Everything that we know today, NIH grant dollars have probably touched everything that we know today in medical research. So it is by no way discounting the approach that we already have that works well. But we also know that there's things we haven't solved. And having a vision like President Biden has for a new agency to come in with a different set of tools, a different culture and kind of understanding of what its role is, to really see problems as a whole, or challenges or scientific issues or societal issues as it relates to human health and disease, and to say, this is a toolkit. I can do more pay for success models. I can do more contracting where we're really driving for answers. The investigator-driven research, again, has contributed to everything we have today, but we just want to add another tool set to say there's still challenges. Let's take these on. He always talks about cancer as part of that. We are really looking forward to having strong leadership of an ARPA for Health or an ARPA-H, and have that leadership and their team come together and decide what problems are best served by this vision and this model. So more to come very soon, but we're excited about the progress from bipartisan members of Congress to get this set up, and really hopeful for what it means for our approach to certain types of cancer broadly, and human health across the country.
Well, that really does sound hopeful, and able to bring new tools and new strategies to the fight against cancer and glioblastoma in particular. Of course, sadly, one of the things that we saw in the last 12 years is what we mentioned earlier: 3 national leaders, Senator McCain, Senator Kennedy, and Beau Biden, pass of glioblastoma. Senator McCain and Senator Kennedy actually passed the same day, 9-10 years apart from each other. But what unites all 3 of those individuals and so many more around the country is public service and a call to duty, a call to action to take on some of the toughest challenges. And so it's with that spirit, wanted to ask you, what can we do in the brain tumor community to support the efforts of the Cancer Moonshot, get involved and help this really important mission that President Biden and First Lady Jill Biden are leading, and you're doing such a great job coordinating.
Thank you so much. Well, first, we are not even 6 months in to this effort. So we are really just getting started. We think we have, like I said, a great shared agenda. Just last week, our cancer cabinet rolled out the priority actions where they're really going to be focusing. Send us input on what we're missing or how to best target the resources that we're already committing. Are we getting the goals right? What are your personal stories that will continue to inspire us and everyone around the country to do even more? And if you're an organization or a company or an academic institution or anyone who touches this, look at the agenda, see if there's something more that you can be doing either through your individual action or in collaboration. And all of that can come through different parts of our website at whitehouse.gov/cancermoonshot. From the beginning, this was meant to be built by patients and for patients. The president, then vice president in 2016, did a listening tour before we even got off the ground. We did the same thing this time, but we know that we can't touch and reach everyone. And so this website is our way to really say, we want to hear from you. We want to hear your progress, why you're hopeful, and make sure that this agenda is really being driven by those most directly impacted by cancer.
Well, thank you. And to our audience, you heard it from Dr. Danielle Carnival. Let's go to that website, whitehouse.gov, and see, let's bring forward our best ideas to Dr. Carnival and the Moonshot program. Danielle, thanks so much for being with us on this 4th annual glioblastoma awareness day. And we want to put glioblastoma in our rearview mirror for sure, but it gives us more than hope. It gives us a real strategy to know that the White House and a united Congress want to build awareness and go after glioblastoma as a high priority on America's public health agenda. So thank you so much for being with us today, and thank you for sharing your story and being part of our community.
Of course. Well, as a neuroscientist and someone who lost a parent to this disease, I am going nowhere. I am with you until we reach the end here. So appreciate the platform that you all provide for this disease, and I look forward to continuing to make progress together.
Absolutely. Together it is. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
And thank you to all our panelists today. I think there are 3 main takeaways we can all learn from our expert panel. The first is that to beat glioblastoma, we need community, and that community is right here. It's going to take all of us, patients, caregivers, friends, family members, researchers, physicians, advocates, nurses, social workers, government officials, all of us to conquer and cure this devastating disease. Number 2, there are promising strategies being developed to do better research and advance towards better therapies that will improve quality of life and prolong survival for glioblastoma patients. There is hope in these strategies. We're working to defeat this disease from every angle. Number 3, we have to keep speaking up. Advocacy is so important, and we thank the champions for Glioblastoma Awareness Day for all they've done to elevate our cause and bring awareness, as well as action, the action necessary to create that change. Our work here is far from over. We will continue to advocate to make this decade one of transformative progress. Thank you all again to our panelists for joining us today. And thanks to all who have joined us today for the 4th annual Glioblastoma Awareness Day from across the country, around the world. Thank you for helping us shine a light on this devastating disease.